convert commercial properties into homes is a popular idea in Canada. Several Canadian cities are facing high office vacancy rates even as many workers have returned to downtown towers and suburban business parks. With residential rents increasing and a housing shortage in much of Canada, the idea of turning empty offices into housing is very trendy. There's even government funding for renovating offices into residential use. Projects are underway in Calgary and Halifax, others are being planned or debated in Toronto, London, Ontario, and Yellowknife. But what are the keys to making an office conversion work? And how much do conversions reduce the glut of office space and create meaningful housing stock? The federal government thinks it can address the country's red-hot housing market by having property owners convert commercial buildings, left vacant due to the pandemic, into livable spaces, but industry watchers question whether that plan is realistic. The Liberals, in Monday's federal budget announcement, indicated that $1.3 billion of previously announced funding will be reallocated to create more homes. Of that, $300 million will be dedicated to converting vacant commercial properties into 800 units of market rental housing. As the demand for retail and office space has changed due to COVID, some landlords, particularly in major urban cores, are facing higher vacancies, the budget stated. This is an opportunity for property owners and communities to explore converting excess space into rental housing, enhancing the livability and affordability of urban communities. Kaiser Mian, Senior Director of Research, Valuations, and Advisory at Altus Group Limited, said hotels would seem to be the most optimal type of commercial property to make such a change. The feasibility has to start from more of a macro view, he said. The location of the property, the physical attributes of the property, the proximity to complementary facilities and amenities. If that checks all the boxes, then you have to look at the actual construction of the building you want to convert and how much additional work you have to do. A hotel guest room, he said, already has a bathroom, living space and heating, ventilation and air conditioning, HVAC, unit, as well as fairly wide corridors and elevators, so all it really needs to be a functional home is a kitchenette. But a big problem with converting office spaces is planning, since those buildings don't have sufficient plumbing to support housing units, and a developer would have to account for that when adding suitable kitchens and washrooms. That can be a prohibitive cost, Mian said, adding that's especially the case for property owners who took a hit during the pandemic. Office spaces do have an advantage in that their open-floor concepts can allow developers to create a variety of unit sizes, whereas hotels are restricted to existing room sizes unless major renovations are done. Even though office space vacancies have risen nationally over the past 4 quarters, it's still too early to tell if the death of the office warrants a ramp-up in housing conversions, Mian said. In the first quarter of 2021, downtown office vacancies across the country rose to 14.3%, up from 13% the previous quarter, according to CBRE data. At the same time, demands to visit office spaces are noticeably on the rebound, said John Ramskar, CBRE's Toronto Downtown Managing Director, in an April press release. In fact, in March, Toronto saw the most office space tours since the onset of the pandemic, with demand highest among tech companies and law firms, he said in the release. Canadian office markets are beginning to stabilize with some early indications of a shift in sentiment in some sectors. Chuck Scott, chief executive of Cushman & Wakefield plc in Canada, said big, downtown office towers likely won't be converted. These are generally owned by investors with a long-term, strong conviction for the office sector, he said in an emailed statement. Mian echoed Scott's analysis of the office sector, and added that even the hotels best positioned for housing conversion are typically 20 to 40 years old. It's still early days, as far as the office sector and how it's going to play out, he said. There may not be an oversupply issue once we're on the other end of COVID. Government buy-in a key factor. Another important part of a successful conversion, experts said, is government. Some governments are turning their own excess space into housing. In 2021, the federal Liberals promised to invest $600 million to help developers convert office space into new rental housing. The Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, CMHC, however, said it could not provide an update on whether that money has been spent. Nova Scotia is putting $1.9 million into the conversion of a 55-year-old building in downtown Halifax. And in the past 2 years, Calgary has committed $153 million to help building owners turn offices into residential through its Downtown Development Incentive Program. Vacancy rates have soared in the Alberta city since 2014, thanks to energy companies cutting back on staff when the price of oil tanked, and the pandemic made it worse. According to CBRE data, Toronto has 12.9 million square feet of empty office space, while smaller Calgary has even more at 14 million square feet. Applying Painter's 25% estimate on conversions, Calgary could potentially create 3.5 million square feet of housing. In simple terms, that's about 3,500 apartments at 1,000 square feet each. Over the next decade, Calgary wants to eliminate 6 million square feet of office space and is doling out a $75 per square foot subsidy to developers for conversions. 5 buildings in Calgary have been approved for conversion so far, and Maxim Olszewski's company owns one of them. His company, People First Developments, is putting 112 2- and 3-bedroom apartments into a 10-story office building. The city is covering $7.8 million of the $38 million renovation. Olszewski's company bought the building out of foreclosure. The city's contribution really made this project possible, he said of the conversion. With construction costing up to $400 per square foot, Wong said government support will be critical to many conversion projects. I think you need that type of partnership, as well as zoning changes, for this to work. But he adds conversions alone are not going to solve the problem of excess office inventory in Calgary or other markets. It's not going to be sort of fixed in the next 2 or 3 years with some office conversion here and there, he said. It's going to take a long time. With 5 conversion projects approved and about $50 million spent so far, Calgary has taken about 650,000 square feet of office space, just 10% of its target, out of downtown. London, Ontario, is considering a similar approach for its downtown, adding in affordable housing. If government support is involved, housing advocates say office conversions should be required to include mixed and low-income housing. Prioritizing that is an obvious no-brainer in my mind, said Noha Sedki, an urban planner with City Spaces in Vancouver. We've seen the vacancy rates drop and average rents increase in every city in our country. Sedki has worked in affordable housing and land development for 2 decades. She also points out a mix of housing and conversion projects is good for the local labor pool because it means having a variety of professionals and service retail workers that are living in the community where they work. Nova Scotia's government is subsidizing rents at 20% below market value for some units at a conversion project in Halifax. Calgary's $153 million incentive program has no requirements for affordable housing. However, the city gave $5.5 million to groups converting a tower into housing for vulnerable populations, and Olszewski said his project includes units priced below market rates. Architect Stephen Painter thinks government support and community planning is important for making conversions successful. He points to Detroit and Kansas City, Missouri, as cities where office conversion programs succeeded before the pandemic. Having only 25% of offices being candidates for conversion might seem small, he said, but it's actually billions of square feet across the US and Canada that could create a lot of housing and keep construction materials out of landfills.